So hi, everybody. Perfect. So we've had some wonderful discussions here in the room around diversity, plurality, and 21st century competencies, and I am so excited to have Jackie and Dawn talking to us. So we've been talking about the SEI example. Dawn was like, we need some space, and we were so excited that we have the space to talk about this great piece around how are we as employers really being those proponents of forward thinking and tolerance and creating a sustainable approach to inclusion. So I am excited to have you guys here.
Yeah, thank you, Liz, so much. And thank you for pulling all of this wonderful stuff together for the past couple of days. You deserve lots of praise.
Oh, thanks. No, I'm still like seriously just still have goosebumps that we're all doing this, and it takes a village. It certainly does. It certainly does.
Oh, thanks again, and thanks for having us. And hello, Jackie.
Hello, Jackie.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Perfect.
So I was able to tune into Cordelia. Is that how you pronounce her name? Cordelia? Her session for a bit. And I know some of you who are still on this session may have heard her words. And she said something about changing behavior, especially in the D&I space, is not at all about posting a course and making sure that we have 100% completion rates. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. SEI has a wonderful example of the great work that they have already been doing before this has become a major in our face issue over the past couple of weeks. It has always been something that we should have been paying more attention to. And so we're really happy that we can share this with you. But just to give some context, we know that we have employees and employers on the call with us today. And diversity and inclusion affects everyone, both sides. Employers are faced with this idea of how do we change the way we have been recruiting and how do we change the culture within our organization so that we can be more inclusive. And employees, as they're looking for jobs, we've been talking about how it's a bit of a struggle to be who you are, how you show up as you and not just as your resume, or not trying to be what you think you're being asked for in order to get a job. So all of those things will come into play when we talk about the programs that SEI is doing, and also the people who are in the communities who are affected by the work. So with that, I am going to share my screen. And Liz, actually, I'm going to ask you for a recommendation here. If I share my screen, I can't see myself. Is there a better way of doing that?
So if you share a Chrome tab or the application window, you can put it into a side tab.
Oh, perfect. Okay. And that's right. And you told me about that the other day, and I was
good.
So here we go. Okay. All right. So you should be able to see my PowerPoint right now. Is that correct?
It's building up.
Okay.
Yep, there it is.
Okay, and then we will play. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so the title of our session today, Employers as Agents of Forward Movement and Tolerance. And while we keep talking about what employers need to do to change, to create this new culture of tolerance and a new way of recruiting employees, the point that we need to truly focus on is the sustainability of those recruitment efforts. We have to make sure that if we are choosing to bring new types of people into the organization, or if we're focusing on different talent pools, that the incumbent workforce and the culture within the organization is ready for it. So everyone in this process needs to be changed. We need an overall, a systemic behavior change if we want this to work. So that's a key focus. And the reason why that is so important to me is that I truly believe that that is where L&D professionals can become heroes. We have the opportunity to create learning experiences, learning moments that are going to change the way people behave. That's why we're in this profession, and we have the expertise to do that. And so it's a huge effort for us to take on, but it's also something that will build story by story. And so as we can see one individual change his or her approach to their outlook on things, or the way that they treat or appreciate someone else in the workplace, or how they look at someone a little bit differently because they've learned to unlearn some of these ideas that they had about a culture or the way someone looks. All of that, those little bits will start to create this behavior change that we're all looking for. And so much of that can be managed by the L&D function. And Jackie, if you can talk a little bit about just how strategic education, and please also give context to all the great work that Strategic Education Inc. does, why it decided to look at different talent pools in order to elevate employability overall.
Yeah. So quick introduction first. So I'm Jackie Hartwig. I am from Strategic Education, which, if you're not familiar, is the umbrella group for Capella University, Strayer University, some boot camps, as well as some different online platforms like Sophia. So our perspective really is, and I'm in the what's called the Office of Employability, so very much focused on SEI's mission, which is really to maximize economic mobility for our students. That's our sole mission, and what we focus on in our office is being able to do that. And we know getting a degree or some type of credential helps you. Helps that individual have upward mobility. There are many other things that help you, not just a degree, but for some, getting a college education is an opportunity cost that people just can't afford. When you think about diversity, and especially now with COVID even hitting certain communities even harder economically. It becomes an even bigger barrier to earning a credential that can get you that economic mobility. And waiting too. So if it's, okay, I'm not going to do this now, but I eventually do it, let's say in 15, 20 years, that delta on earnings is diminished. So you're really, the concern is that the problem is just getting worse with the issues that we're seeing in 2020. So really what we're trying to do is enable these opportunities, reducing those barriers for underserved communities, and in part supplying employers with a high potential diverse talent pool.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jackie. And
yeah,
and then also, this is where I was speaking earlier about what it means to have diversity efforts when it comes to recruiting. So there's the idea of identifying these talent pools, which SEI is doing a great job of, and other organizations are doing a great job of, to create relationships with different areas. In this case, many low-income communities. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the specific programs that SEI is looking at. But when you are looking at new talent pools, that's a great start. And it's a great relationship to begin, so that you can begin to understand where talent may be coming from that you haven't looked for before. But the problem has been for a long time that when you start to recruit those different talent pools into the organization itself is not ready for it. We've seen a number of examples, and many of you out there I know have worked in these types of programs. Specifically, I've worked with a number of veteran programs where the measure was always how many veterans got jobs in these locations or at these places of employment. And those numbers started to look really great. We got really good at figuring out how to place a veteran in a new job, a corporate setting. But what happened was you go 30 days in and 60 days in, and that person is no longer working for that employer because the culture was not supportive of that individual, or the individual was not fully acclimated to what the expectation was in the workplace. So it's a true relationship, a true compromise with new diverse pools of talent coming into the workforce, and then being able to be accepting and tolerant of those differences. Because, I even back up, I almost don't want to call them differences. They are new talents, new uniquenesses that are being brought into our organization. And all of us need to be trained up on how to have an open mind for that. And so much of the role in L&D, we can do that. That's something that we can absolutely take on as a role because we know how to teach others. And so I heavily emphasize that for those of you who are looking for jobs, you may never have thought about a career in diversity and inclusion, but I would suggest that if this is a passion of yours, now is the time to think about it. Just today alone, I've spoken with so many people who are part of this summit that when I spoke earlier, then we've been following up back and forth, and I hear it. They're saying, like, this is what I want to do because it's a cause. And so many of us get into this profession because we want to help others. And right now, this is an area of need. So consider it. It may not be for everyone, but it's definitely something that I truly believe that L&D can change. Okay, I'm gonna let Jackie tell of a great story here. This touches on diversity and inclusion, reskilling, upskilling, talent mobility, internal mobility, so many different things that we're all dealing with right now. And also for those of you who are currently employed and thinking about other roles, maybe not outside of your organizations, but even within your organization. And then as employers, this is a great example of finding gold within what you currently have. It may seem overwhelming to say, oh, how do I open my eyes a little bit differently to see everything that I have in here? But that's exactly what we want you to do. We want to start to rethink everything, reflect on everything, because there may be something that we didn't see before because we were going too fast, or because we had the luxury just to keep on pushing forward. Maybe forward is not the direction we need to go. So Jackie's going to tell you a little bit of a story about how Target tackled an issue like that.
Yeah, thank you. And I love sharing this story because it really is a good example when we talk about sustainability and how organizations can do things differently and create a sustainable solution to increase diversity, which is the main opportunity that Target was looking for when they worked with us. They were looking to diversify their talent pipeline, specifically in their tech workforce. The lack of diversity in key corporate functions like software engineering, which is the example here, is primarily a male-dominated field, and they wanted to increase the amount of women that they have filling these jobs. The other challenge that they have is that software engineering is an extremely expensive and time-consuming process to recruit for candidates, not to mention diverse candidates. So really that was the challenges that we worked with Target to help solve for through what is one of our boot camps called HackBright Academy. That academy and boot camp focuses on training solely female software engineers and developers. And what Target did is they were willing to say, okay, we're instead of paying the high cost to recruit and find diverse talent, we are going to sponsor 22 women to go through the HackBright Academy training, which is a 12-week software engineering training, and we will get first pick of. There wasn't a guarantee that they would hire all of them, but the hope was that they were thinking around 15. And that would help solve for their need. So I think some interesting things to know is some customization things, I would say, first and foremost. The course content, we were able to focus on target-specific tech needs, so it really was able to solve specifically for what Target wanted to teach these students, and it would prepare them immediately for on-the-job application so they could step into a job right away. And it also actually, this was pre-COVID, so it actually used Target headquarters in Minneapolis to do the on-site training, and then there was some online training that went along with it. So definitely created a space for a time commitment as well as a financial commitment to do this. They also got target mentors to be able to guide each one of the students that were going through it, networking opportunities, insights on the company culture, that kind of thing. So very much involved in the solution. A couple things to note. I just love sharing, obviously, the results of this. So the key thing to know is that after those 12 weeks, there were 22 candidates. They all successfully completed the program, and Target actually ended up hiring all 22 of the graduates. One of the Target tech teams increased female employee ratio from 45% to 65%. And they saved up to $18,000 per hire in doing this, with just savings on hiring and recruitment costs. And Target's doing it again. They want to do another cohort with us, which we're working on right now. So I love sharing that example. It's a real financial gain for the organization, but a real example of how an organization has built a diverse pipeline, has worked with us to reskill specific community to be able to step in and take on those roles. Some of these women, I think it's interesting to know what job titles they had prior to becoming a software engineer in 12 weeks, which is, yes, it's doable. It really did happen. But they were hotel front desk clerk, restaurant manager, retail banker, tax preparer, math teacher. So very, very broad range of women who came on and said, I want to reskill, change careers, and had the opportunity now working at Target.
Yeah, and I love that story on so many different perspectives, because the idea that someone who was maybe a barista or a math teacher had the courage to say, I'm going to try something completely different. I feel that reskilling efforts open up those doors to so many people, but I always want to congratulate the individuals that choose to participate in them, because we know how hard it is to make a career shift. And then secondly, for L&D professionals, we know how hard it is to measure learning impact, and we struggle with it. And these types of reskilling efforts that show someone's progress, and organizationally, and then through a cohort, and then to an organizational level, really validate what learning can do for an individual and for the company. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, the fact that in doing all of this, Target created a new balance in terms of the gender imbalance that was going on in this particular role for the company. So just so many good things about that. And I know a number of you, if you are currently employed, are probably contemplating that whole reskilling bit, maybe even being asked, like, what should we do with all of these people in this organization if we are currently in a hiring freeze, but we have roles to fill? Or then you can also look at, what if we are now hiring again and we have a number of people coming in? Should we step back and actually think, what should we do with all of these incoming employees? How can we best train them so that they can be agile in this organization and have a great number of skills versus just pigeonholing them into a particular role? So lots to think about. And we know with this type of story, the results can actually be there. And so we're going to move on to another example here. And this one is close to Jackie and I. We both work on this one, and it deals with young professionals. So Strategic Education, Inc. started a program that specifically targeted high school graduates in low-income areas, specifically in New York and DC, but the program is very quickly is nationwide. And the idea behind it was to set up these graduates with all they need to be successful in the workplace, whether it's essential workplace skills, an ongoing education, mentors, and then promised employment. So Jackie, in a second, I'm just going to ask you to go through how the organization decided to do that, how those relationships were developed. But ultimately, what we're going to be talking to you about is what we learned as we were placing some of these high school graduates into the workplace, and how the high school graduates, the young professionals, responded, and how the employers responded. because it's our job to keep making those relationships better and stronger. And so that when these high school students end up going into these jobs, they feel comfortable sooner and the company is ready to onboard them in a better, stronger way. So Jackie, if you can just talk a little bit specifically about this program and how SEI decided to go about making these relationships in these communities with high schools.
Yeah, so another great example here where we are really looking, again, back at our mission around maximizing economic mobility and looking at students who do have cost as a major barrier to being able to get a credential. And giving, the question is, how can we give students in underserved communities, students of color, an opportunity that they wouldn't necessarily get otherwise to be able to get on that upward trajectory after graduating high school. So what we are providing is a free associate degree or boot camp experience for them. They start it while they're in high school, but primarily do that right after they continue on right after finishing high school. But while they're getting that credential, they're also paired up to get an on-the-job work experience with an employer partner, where, similar to the Target experience, they're going into a place of work, getting relevant experience tied to the skills that they're developing in their academic program, getting that experience, and then by a year or sooner after graduating high school, they have that credential and that experience to get them moving forward. They could always, keep going up, obviously, with their education from there, but the fact is that they're better set up and better prepared to see that economic mobility with this program.
Excellent. And then let's talk a little bit, Jackie, about some of the stories that we heard from employers as well as the students. If you don't mind, let's go the employer side first. You recently received feedback from some of the employers who placed the students. And for the audience, we have some stats there on the left. We're not talking about the work that we've done so far is not with a huge group of students. We have placed right now 20 different students. There's a total of 32 students who we've been working with, and 20 have been placed into different employer situations. So Jackie, if you can just talk a little bit about the feedback that has been received from the employer so far.
Yeah, I'd say broad-based feedback is very positive. What we know is 9 out of the 10 supervisors, some are hiring managers, have more than one student that they have. So there's about 10 supervisors right now that we have surveyed, and 9 out of 10 of them are very satisfied with the program so far. So that always feels good. The one that didn't say very satisfied was just so new into it, and they didn't, and the virtual training due to COVID, they thought was a barrier just because it was, they see that there would be so much more value in having a face-to-face or in-person training or onboarding experience. So not negative to our program, but thought that was, something that unfortunately had to happen.
But looking under the hood a little bit, I think this is the takeaway with this program. Strategic Education Inc. serves as a partner between the employee and who in this case is the high school graduate, and the employer. And while the employers generally were very satisfied with the work done by the employees, Strategic Education Inc. was dealing with each person on a relatively individual level. There was a lot of coaching done on an individual level because it wasn't just the shoe fit perfectly as each of these students walked in the door. There was a lot of coaching, there was a lot of mentoring, and in some cases there was friendship. Certain situations that were occurring in these students' lives because they are from low-income communities, and they have fewer resources. Those things were happening, and SEI was there to mitigate them so that they could be successful in the workplace. And the reason I think it's so important to talk about that work is because it's what SEI is doing that we hope we end up closing that gap so that it's not a third party that needs to do that, but organizations are ready to bring on different talent pools, and they're ready to accept some of those different scenarios that may come in. So Jackie, if you can, and I know this is like being very honest and transparent, and obviously we're not going to name names, but just some of the examples of what you as a partner, and I have some of my own, we're listening to when it comes to these young professionals who are now entering the workplace. What were some of the stories that we can share?
Yeah. So here I have maybe two good examples to share. One is with a young woman named Rebecca. We have taken on some of the students at SEI as well. Since it's a new program, we're proving it out ourselves as well. She started in a role that was most likely too advanced for where she was at. But there were definite conversations with the hiring manager around expectations of what skills she has, where she's coming in. One of the things that we learned is just the fact that their onboarding and training, it didn't involve things like learning how to use Outlook, as a calendar. It's something that the student just had never done before in any of her previous roles. And, that was a struggle, and it wasn't an expectation coming in that they would need to teach her that. So it's just, that was sort of an example of a learning where there may not have been clear expectations of sort of how can you meet the student where they're at and start from there. I think the good news in this story is that we were able to find her through conversations actually a different role that was a better fit for her. And she's doing great in that role. So I think it was a matter of also finding a hiring manager that was willing to take the time and work with her to get her up to speed in a role that was
right. And then I'll tell one that I felt we can replace this, but it's just a kind of an analogy to many things that may be happening in the workplace. But one of the students she was placed in a call center role, and she contacted me and she said that she feels like she can't work consistently because she had braces put on, and talking that much hurts her mouth. And I loved that she told me that, because no one would ask that. No one would think about it, but you would very quickly jump to, oh, she's not performing. And I think too often as employers, we do that without understanding the circumstances. I think putting everyone in their house through the pandemic over the past 6 months and truly understanding work-life balance and the fact that personal issues are inevitable, it has helped us be more empathetic to individuals and what they're going through. And I love that she was bold enough to explain that, because then we can explain that to the employer and say, this is what's going on. So she may need a fewer breaks throughout the day, but she'll still get the job done. And that's easy to get over. But I think too often we're afraid to express what we look at as being different about ourselves. And then it ends up being a compromising factor to our success. And so I just encourage all of us to, and I think we're all getting there, but just sitting back and being a little bit more empathetic before we judge, and then we can be more accepting overall. And if we can all, as we all slowly start to practice that, then we eventually get to that level of inclusion. We're better listeners for it.
I think another example just to share is with a student who hasn't yet been placed. I shared this example because when we talk about diversity and sort of meeting the student where they're at, this is a student who is a first generation college student. Her parents are immigrants. She actually just moved to the U.S. a few years ago, and her first language is French. So she has taught herself how to speak English, how to write English, and she actually graduated high school just this spring as valedictorian of her class. But we're struggling to find her a placement because she has an accent, and a lot of the roles are virtual, and that seems to have be a barrier, which is frustrating to have to say, and you know, and it is, she'll be such a great employee, and she's, you know, doing so well academically, but that language piece is it's causing employers to take pause, I think, and pick another candidate. So it's just another example of, I think, the barriers that
and Jackie, that example reminds me of something also. In my own work, I started to work with a company where primarily the employees speak Spanish. And when I started going on Zoom calls with them, it was really exhausting I'm going to say this exactly how I felt it, and then I'll explain. It was exhausting for me to be on a Zoom call listening and really listening to what my colleagues were saying. And I was feeling a little resentful, like, whoa, I have to be on these calls all day long, and this is so hard for me. And then I thought, wait, this is hard for me? They're trying to speak my language because I can't speak theirs. And when I thought about it from that perspective, I had unbelievable gratitude toward them for doing what they were doing, that it no longer felt exhausting. And I think it takes a lot for us to sit back and not feel bad for us, or not feel like it's going to be hard for us. But when you do, there's so much goodness that comes from it, and there's so much potential that comes from it. So I know it's hard to do those types of things, and we all have to kind of reflect within ourselves to say, okay, what is making me uncomfortable right now? And can I overcome it? And if I do, then what? Because it's too easy to take the path we've always taken. It's much harder to take the new path, but the new path might take you places that you could never have dreamed of. So that's what we're talking about. And that's this quote in front of us: diversity is having a seat at the table, inclusion is having a voice, and belonging is having that voice be heard. It's allowing us to really think about what it is we're doing. We know what we want. We want the conversation to be about diversity, but the inclusion aspect is making sure everyone has their chance to talk, and then that everyone is being listened to. So it takes a lot, but once it happens, then there is this culture of appreciation that we really, you know, that's where the beauty is behind true diversity and inclusion efforts. And yeah, we just wanted to go through this a little bit, and then we'll take some questions, but just really understanding what these words mean. What is our role in diversity? And it's the idea of being open to new talent pools, being open to all types of people to fill the roles that we have. I would even say it's rethinking the roles we have. If you have great talent out there, is there a way that you can use that? Is there a way that you can harness energy, or harness an ability that is harder to write in a resume, or harder to write in a job description? How can you use these great uniquenesses of these individuals? And then with inclusion, with the employer, it's about designing learning behavior, and that's our role as L&D professionals. How can we do that? And what I think is so essential is not just designing learning, but designing practice forums for people to test this out. Even if it's just a very simple, hey, tomorrow let's talk to someone new, or let's ask someone a question. All of those things help us to learn about a different person, a different culture, a different role. That's what helps us to build this sense of inclusion. And then, of course, that giving the employee the confidence to be able to participate. So, so much of us have these groups within our organizations right now that are doing this to promote, so that we all feel like we have a space. But part of me thinks, let's make the space the big space. Let's all be in this space so that we can talk openly and people will listen to us. Because ultimately, it's the belonging that we want. We want everyone to feel like they have a place and that they're being listened to, because you never know where an idea is going to come from. And the appreciation that you show to someone for listening to those ideas can go a long way. So I'm going to stop sharing here, but we're still going to be with you for a couple of minutes. This is a little bit about SEI. I know we've given you some information today, but if you wanted to learn more, you can go over to the site. But also we wanted to let you know that Jackie and I never want to stop putting these young professionals in good places. So if you have any openings that you are thinking about placing from an entry-level position, we have some great students who are graduating and looking for that kind of work, and it gives you all a chance to learn about different talent pools and how your organization can properly respond to them. So if you are interested, just let us know. Otherwise, I'm going to stop sharing, and then we'd love to get your questions so that you can talk a little bit about some of the efforts that you are using in your organization and how we can potentially give you some best practices based on the work that we've done. And I'm just looking through here as well. Sorry, I'm just getting my chat back up here. Okay. Yeah, so Jackie, one of the things that I think keeps coming across here is from a corporate perspective, how are organizations really, what are you seeing in terms of how they're preparing for an initiative like this, where they have committed to diversity, but how are they going about the reskilling efforts that are required? Like you mentioned the Target example, but you talk to a lot of different companies, and what is their mindset about reskilling?
It is pretty different depending on the organization. What we have noticed is the size of the organization matters and what they can take on. For example, I think they look at, okay, what could be a scalable solution versus a one-time option. And as we talked about with that, then how do you sustain it? How do you keep it going? So identifying those who can help support, do they have enough resources to support? If not, how would they make that happen? And then how to start. Maybe it's not starting huge, it's starting small and piloting and testing something.
Right.
And then
Jackie,
growing
one other question. Historically, and even when this program began, the education component was an associate degree. And very quickly, especially during the past 6 to 8 months with the pandemic, that started to change because companies needed skills fast. And so they were interested in working with SEI. However, they were no longer interested in waiting for a student to get a degree. And can you talk a little bit about, because that's been a rapid change over the past couple of months. And I think we're all feeling that in L&D. We're all questioning, well, what is the value of the degree? And wait a minute, we build skills. So can we go that way instead?
Yeah, I think there's, that's twofold in terms of the pathways we have. One is like a course pathway. So it's kind of pick your own adventure. There's sort of a package of courses that get that student to where they need to be skill-wise. That doesn't take an entire degree to do so. That can be packaged up. So for example, we did that with an organization that basically took 5 of our IT courses, which allows and prepares a student to sit for 2 IT certifications, which you don't need the actual degree to do. And then that can be like a pathway in and of itself outside of a degree program, boot camp, same example. So these are faster ways to get to the skills that employers are looking for without having to wait for the degree. The other thing I will say is that a lot of the organizations we've talked to are really impressed by the way that we've sort of redone our gen eds. So associate degree is a lot of gen eds, and one could argue, oh, is that really relevant with the skills that I need to develop as an employer? What we've done is we have actually surveyed a lot of different companies across the globe, Disney, Visa being two examples, and asked, what are those skills that you need day one that you would expect from a college grad, and that maybe you're not necessarily seeing, and what would you like to see? Those ended up being what we call the 10 essential skills that we've built into the curriculum. So things like communication, agility, problem solving. These are things that any employee you would want to have. So they're getting those relevant skills in a degree format too, which is kind of a nice to know.
Right. And then one last question. When you were working with Target, was there a outcome or goal assigned in the diversity category? Like, because you had mentioned that there was a shift in the percentage of females who are now in coder roles. Did they have any expectation as to what was going to happen, or did they intend to get to a certain level?
I don't know about a percentage-wise what they intended. I know that they were expecting, willing to sponsor 22 students, thinking, okay, well, maybe we will hire about 15. So that was kind of their, I think, goal number. But after seeing the progress all the women made and interviewing them for the roles, they ended up hiring all of them. So in that sense, surpassed the goal of the 15 that they were thinking about doing. But there wasn't a specific percentage in terms of changing.
All right, because I mean that's one thing in L&D that we're always trying to align better with business outcomes and business goals. And I do feel like we have this great opportunity with the convergence of D&I, internal mobility, and reskilling that we can really start to show the impact of training on organizations. Well, Liz, I think I host webinars all the time. You host webinars all the time. So I think I went through all of the questions before you even got to.
You're awesome. I love it. I'm like, I'm good.
And also, I think it's midnight where you are. Is that right?
Close, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can give you a break and play a dual role, I am happy to do so.
That was awesome. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Jackie. I think it's a beautiful example, and really this piece around, how can we think things through differently, because there's a lot of opportunities, and it's a lot of just how are we listening with empathy and just being a little bit aware and taking that different lens to look at something, and then all of a sudden it opens it up and say, hey, there are different possibilities. So great example. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's almost like I think we all so many of us have the COVID puppy that we all got because we were at home, and it may not have fit in the family right now. But I almost want to say, like, organizations, like, this is the time. Let's bring people in and nurture them. Like, we have this opportunity. Let's do it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I love it. All right, my dears, I'm going to send everybody back out to the floor, and we're going to go back into the main room for the closing, and then the Ask Me Anything sofa is opening up. All right.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Liz, and thank you all for joining us today. Thanks, Jackie. Always a pleasure. Have a great night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.